In a small village of Ohamba lived a girl named Ako. She was young and beautiful, but her beauty did not win her the village respect. Instead, Ako was notorious for reckless behavior. She defiled the village tradition and values, and over time, the people had given up on her changing. She lived with her old grandfather, who can barely walk on his own. Despite his age and inability to physically care for her, he loved her deeply. Ako's behavior had earned her a terrible reputation. She would sneak into the local bar to drink with men, argue and fight with anyone who crossed her path, and was often seen wearing short dresses. She rarely smiled or laughed. They whispered that she was promiscuous, that no man would marry her. She would never be a good wife, they say. However, she was indifferent to their judgment. She had built a wall around her heart that no one could penetrate. Yet, Ako had a gift that no one could deny. She was a very good cook. She prepared and sold food in the market, attracting customers from all over the village. Her food was so good that even those who disliked her could not resist buying from her. This only fueled the jealousy of women who saw her success as another reason to despise her. One day, after a long day of selling food in the market, Aku was exhausted. On her way home, she felt exhausted. She decided to sit under a tree to rest. Looking up, she saw a car, sleek and unfamiliar, in the quiet village, driving towards her. The driver, a man named Oji, rolled down his window and asked for directions. Oji was from the city, and his presence alone stirred curiosity in the village. Ako, with her usual straight face, gave him the direction he needed and looked away. But Oji, noticing how tired she looked, asked her where she was headed. Fortunately, they were going in the same direction. Oji offered her a ride. Aku was skeptical to accept the offer, but she was too tired to say no. When he drove by the village to drop her at her house, the village buzzed with gossip. Now she's seen the city men. Now they are carrying her in baby cars and sleeping around with her. Who knows what she's up to now? Oji, however, had no such thought. He was in the village to oversee the completion of a house he was building. And the next day, he found himself in need of food for the workers helping him to build his house. Remembering that the young woman from the previous day was also a food seller, immediately he drove to Ako's house and asked her if she could cook for his workers. Aku agreed as it was an opportunity to earn more money. On their way back to the construction site, Oji struck up a conversation with her. To his surprise, Aku was not just beautiful. She's also intelligent and well articulated. She seemed out of place in the small village, and Oji couldn't help but wonder what had brought her there. He asked her, "Why do you live alone with your grandfather? Where is your family and siblings?" Aku was silent for some minutes while they drove in silence. Suddenly, she began, "I left my family and moved to this village." She began to share a painful past. "When I was 16, my family lost everything in a devastating flood that swept through the village. My parents was unable to provide for me and my siblings. They sent me to live with my aunt and my uncle in a distant village. At first, they welcomed me warmly into their home, but soon things took a dark turn. My aunt began to treat me like a servant, forcing me to work in harsh conditions without rest. As if that was not enough, my uncle, Mr. Ude, began to sexually abuse me, starting just 2 weeks after I arrived. I tried to tell my auntie, but instead of protecting me, she beat the hell out of me and called me a liar. After 2 years of abuse, I ran away in the dead of night, returning to my parents' house. But when I told them what had happened, They refused to believe me. My mother accused me of being promiscuous and wanting to leave only because I wanted to live a sinful life. My father turned his back on me, telling me to go back and never come home again. Devastated, I sought refuge with my grandfather, the only person who had ever truly cared for me. Aku had lived with her grandfather ever since then, but the trauma of her past has shaped the way she saw the world. Aku hated men for what her uncle had done to her. She resented her family for abandoning her when she needed them the most. She vowed never to let anyone control her again. And this vow manifested in her wild, reckless behavior. She had lost all faith in love, trust, and the idea of stable and respectable life. Oji was deeply moved by Aku's story. He saw beyond her anger and rebellion, understanding that she was just protecting herself from further pain. Oji began to spend more time with Aku, not out of pity, but out of respect and admiration. He saw the strong, resilient woman beneath the surface and admired her intelligence, her strength, and ability to survive in the world that happened so cruel to her. As they spent more time together, Aku found herself slowly opening up to Oji. She had never trusted anyone in the way she began to trust him, and despite her best effort to remain distant, she found herself falling for him. Oji too had fallen in love with Aku, and one day he asked her to marry him. Aku was hesitant. Her past haunted her, and she feared that she was too damaged to ever be a good wife. But Oji reassured her, telling her that he loved her for who she was, not for who the villager thought she should be. Their wedding day came, and the entire village gathered, many out of curiosity rather than celebration. Aku, who had once been outcast, stood radiant in her traditional attire. The villagers, especially the women, they were so surprised that a man from the city can marry Aku. They had judged her for so long without knowing her true story, and now they realized how wrong they had been. As they exchanged vows, Aku felt a sense of peace she had never known before. For the first time in years, on their wedding night, Oji noticed a scar on her waist, faint but still visible. He asked, "What happened to you here?" With tears, she told him, "This scar on my waist came from the beating I received from my aunt the day I told her her husband was sexually abusing me. She beat the hell out of me that day." Oji held her close and promised, "You are safe now." And for the first time, he said, "I love you and I will protect you." After completing his house in the village, Oji decided to go back to the city, this time with Ako. But before leaving for the city, Oji and Ako visited her grandfather to thank him for his unwavering support. He had always seen the good in her, even when no one else did. Sometimes all it takes is true love to unlock someone's true potential, he told her. Aku's story spread throughout the village, and eventually her parents, hearing of her transformation, come to seek for forgiveness. Aku turned between anger and compassion, sought Oji's advice. Together, they confronted her parents, and Aku made it clear that while she had forgiven them, she has risen above their cruelty. She was no longer the broken girl they cast out. Aku's final act of grace was to take her two young siblings along with her to the city. At first, that did not sit well with her parents, but she insisted until they gave in. Years later, Aku and Oji sat together watching the sunset. Aku turned to him and said, "I never thought I would find peace, but you showed me when no one else did." Oji smiled and replied, "I saw the beauty within you, and I knew you deserved the world." Together, they have shown that love is the power to heal even the deepest wound, and that no matter how broken someone may feel, redemption is always possible. And so, Aku, that was once a village bad girl, lived happily ever after as a loving wife and a mother of two.